everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I hope you are having a wonderful weekend. Our best goes out to our inventor of Home Talk USA, Michael King. We know that he is under the weather, and we are hoping that he is back in swing with us next week. But in the meantime, we've got an hour of Made in the USA, where we actually talk about the process of manufacturing in the USA and feature then products that are made in the USA. And it's so important that we support then the people who keep their feet and their manufacturing on our soil. So Greg Owens, thank you so much for running this hour for us and featuring all of these wonderful manufacturers and inventors and product specialists that really look to keep everything here in the U.S.
Well, thank you, Rita. It's a pleasure to be here during the Made in America segment. Today, we have two people coming back to finish up conversations and lead us into some new topics. The first up is Matt Roberts, my partner in crime here at Sherrill Manufacturing. Matt, welcome to the program.
Good to see you guys, or hear you guys again, I guess.
Well, I always, of course, listen in to your segment, Rita, and it's interesting. One of the things that you're talking about during the last hour was not asking your mother for her blessing on what you're doing, because she's always going to give you the thumbs up. It's all great. Go for it. Right. And
absolutely. And it's funny because my mother has worked the National Hardware Show and the ASD Market Week for the last 10 years. And she's in her 80s.
That reminds me of when we first started our website. Of course, we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't follow what you were giving as advice. We didn't go to an expert, so we tried to do it ourselves. And I swear, for the first year, the only people that were going on our website were our mothers. That was my tag. Thankfully, a decade later, we've sort of sorted that one out. But anyway, Matt's here to talk about. We didn't obviously invent flatware. We're not that old. But we did have to sort of reinvent a business and the way that we worked it out. And one of the first things that happened was we both had worked for Oneida Limited in an era that we refer to as the race to the bottom, where they took a lot of quality, and because they were trying to be competitive and drive cost out, they sort of drove the quality down. And Matt and I made a decision very early on that we wanted to drive some of that quality back into the product. Matt, would you like to talk a little bit about why we sort of made that decision?
You're right. The race to the bottom was trying to save the factory from overseas competition. So we were trying to take what we would consider process steps out to reduce the price and reduce the cost so we could compete in the marketplace. And when you start selling direct to the customers, we're no longer competing with factories overseas. We're competing with retailers, and we're competing with high-end retailers. So when we first manufactured our product, we literally took it back out of all of the bags and packaging and reworked it, because we decided that if we're going to put our name on it, we need to make the best product available. So what I would consider we call it low end versus, it's really not low end, our lowest price point product. The real big difference is not the finish quality, it's more of the heft of the material. So we don't have as much money in the raw material, but the finish quality is, we believe, second to none. We inspect every piece one at a time, whereas when we were back in the old days, we would do random sample inspect, or we would just pass the product because we thought it was good enough. For us, that's not the case. We inspect every piece one at a time.
Well, and yeah, one of the things that the customers taught us over the course of time was that when you buy something made in America, you're sort of held to a higher standard. They expect it to be better than the quote unquote junk they're getting from overseas. And if it's not, they're disappointed. So one of the things that we've done in driving that quality back in is we actually do give them a heavier, better finish product back with a warranty that is more than just printing on a card inside your box. The other decision that we made early on was 18.0 versus 18.10. Can you explain for everybody exactly what the difference is in those two grades is stainless steel.
Right. The word stainless steel doesn't mean that it doesn't rust. It means it stains less. So when you look at it, what we call 18O, which is 18% chrome, balance is iron. Whereas 1810 is 18% chrome, 10% nickel, and the balance is iron. 1810 is second only to surgical stainless per se. You're not going to find surgical stainless in a kitchen environment, in a food service environment. So the nickel gives it a better shine. It keeps its shine for longer. It greatly increases the corrosion resistance. We found that some of the 18O product, if you over the course of time, actually gets a blue hue to it, where the 1810, you can look at it 20, 30, 50 years from now, and it's unchanged.
Yeah, that's particularly important if you're using any sort of detergents like they do in the food service industry with bleach in them. It not only will give it that blue hue after a while, but it sort of turns milky white. And I don't know if you've ever seen in your flatware drawer an old piece of flatware that you got that just didn't look like it just came out of the box. It was milky white or blue, or just didn't hold up over time.
Right. I've got some flatware, old Oneida product at my house. But first, all of us have Oneida Limited as well as Liberty Tabletop in our homes. And it's a product called Frederick II from the 1980s. And you would think it came right out of the box because it's made with the 1810. And like you said, Greg, we made a conscious decision. If we're going to give it a really good finish, we want to use the best material possible.
So when you're out there looking at flatware, hopefully it's ours, but maybe it's somebody else's, and you look at the box, it will generally tell you whether it's made out of 18O or 1810, correct?
Yes, it should. And when you go to cutlery and then dinner knives that we make, we're not making, cutlery for a food service environment for a chef, but we're making a knife blade that you want the serration to last a long time. So we have a material. They call it 410. Some people use 420. It has carbon in it. It doesn't have any nickel, and it's hardenable via an atmospheric furnace. So we will put the knives through a furnace, and it will increase the hardness up into the mid 40s, so that blade, not only does it help the corrosion resistance greatly with that material grade, it also makes sure that the edges stay sharp longer.
Right, and then the other important part of that type of steel is you have to buy a high quality 410 or 420 stainless steel so that it's consistent and you can buff and polish out any defects, because any of that forge scale that's left on there that's not buffed out, so finishing is critical, and any defects that lie within the metal that you just keep uncovering it no matter how much you buff it. If those things are present, your knives are going to have issues. And we went to great lengths to find steel suppliers that produce high quality steel, and great lengths to pre-finish it and then give it a nice chrome oxide coating, which is what happens. The oxygen actually reacts with the chrome in stainless steel and forms a shield that keeps the water away from the iron, and that's the way it works.
Right. And the other thing with the processing, with an 18O forged product, you're right. We do a lot of grinding and buffing and polishing and vibratory finishing to remove all the scale off of the part. And then the heat treating is extremely important. So what we do is we put it through what we call an atmospheric furnace that uses hydrogen and nitrogen, so that when the pieces come out of the furnace, they come out cleaner than they did when they went in at a very high temperature, 1900 degrees.
It's actually funny. They do come out with a bright sheen on them out of the furnace. We're going to come back for another segment, and we're going to talk about a couple different aspects of driving quality back into the products. One of them is offering hollow handle knives as well as solid monoblock knives. And then there's an aspect of tooling. The whole market, you might have noticed, has shifted to very plain. The floral designs are no longer offered in stores. And there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about sort of an advantage that we have over folks who don't have the journeyman tool makers. But before we come back with Matt here in a couple minutes, we do have to go pay a few bills, thank our sponsors. So what I'd like to do is thank one of our sponsors. We're going to be talking to one of his representatives in the next segment, Jim Stuber from the Coalition for a Prosperous America, about cool legislation. It'll be interesting for everybody to hear what that's all about. So thank you for listening to this segment. Let's go pay a couple bills, and we'll be back shortly. We're back on Home Talk USA for the Made in America Hour, segment 2. I'm here with Matt Roberts, my partner in crime here at Sherrill Manufacturing and Liberty Tabletop. And we're talking a little bit about something we know quite a bit about, and that is flatware manufacturing and some of the nuances. If you joined us for the last segment, you probably gained an appreciation for it's a little bit more complicated than you might think. You don't just stick a bunch of molten metal in a machine and out pops a nice fork. So one of those interesting things to make are hollow handle knives, which I always like to say are in the tradition of fine sterling silver. Matt, we make two types of knives here. One that is gaining in popularity, which is a solid knife. It's heavier. And the other one is a hollow handle knife. What are the differences between those two from your perspective?
Well, the hollow handle knife was something that from the historical retail dominated the retail industry for many years until a lot of production went overseas. And the solid knife was something used more in a restaurant setting just because of the durability. They get beat up a lot more in a food service environment. But the original knife handles were, they were made from bone. They were made from anything you could use, wood. And once we got into the sterling silver side of the business, you obviously don't want to have a 1 pound sterling silver handle. It'd be so expensive with a sharp knife. So what the manufacturers did is they started with very thin sterling, and they stamped the pieces out, and then they soldered them together in a furnace with silver solder. And when Oneida started manufacturing in stainless steel, they took that specific technology and copied it and modified it to work with 1810 stainless. So our hollow handle knives have two shells made out of 24 thousandths thick 1810 stainless steel. We stamp them, and then we sand the faces so that they match, and then we put them in a furnace and we braze them, very similar to the way a plumber would sweat copper fittings, capillary action the same way. And that's how we make the handle piece. Then that part is finished, and then we use a cement called Sauerreisen cement, made by the Sauerreisen family out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we put the cement in the handles and the knife has a tang on it. So it has a piece that goes into the handle, and then that cement cures and we finish the part. So it's actually a hollow handle knife is made out of 3 pieces, 2 half shells out of 1810 stainless that are stamped, and then a knife blade that is made out of 410 stainless.
And then solid knives. Now, I'm convinced that a lot of it has to do with availability in the marketplace, because we inherited a lot of technology at Liberty Tabletop that allows us to make hollow handle knives pretty cost effectively. But, there's an old adage that when a couple goes in to buy flatware, the wife likes to pick up the fork or the spoon and make sure that it's balanced, and the guy picks up the knife to make sure it's nice and heavy. So we offer some solid knives now that are those nice heavy knives. How are those manufactured?
Yeah, the solid knife and the knife stub for the hollow handle have similar processes. They go through different machines, but a solid knife starts out with a a rod of stainless. Normally, it's either 3/8 or a 1/2 inch diameter, and we cut it to length. All of our steel is melted in the United States, so you're guaranteed to have U.S. steel there. That's what even the 410 stainless is. And then we put it through a number of processes. If you can believe it, we went to the Estwing Hammer Company, and Estwings are all made in Rockford, Illinois, and they make their hammers almost exactly the same way that we make our knives. You start with a rod of the 410 stainless. You roll the blade. So we're rolling a flat, half of it's rolled flat, the other half stays as a rod. And then we have a robot that does automated forging. It grabs that piece by the blade, the flat part, puts it in between two dies at about 1450 degrees Fahrenheit, and at about 500 tons of pressure forges that particular handle. So the knife and the blade and the handle are connected. They're made out of one piece. And then it's very similar to the stub. We trim it, then we finish all the edges, and we grind off all the forge scale. And then depending on what item it is, we would stamp a design into the handle, or we'd make it plain. Obviously, we grind the blades to make to clean the blades up. We serrate them, and then we do a final finish. And just like the flatware, like I mentioned in the previous segment, we look at them one at a time and before we put them in the bag.
You know, Rita was talking with her guest in the last hour about better and safer. And that same concept sort of lends itself to the manufacturing environment as well. And repeatability in a manufacturing setting is absolutely huge. And that robot not only allows us to get a nice repeatable part, which gives you a nice consistent shape and finish, it's also safer for the operator because they don't have to handle a piece of molten metal. How important do you think that was in that decision to implement that robot?
Well, that's a very physically demanding process that beats up on your body. It's hot, it's dirty, it can be dirty. And then you've got you've got to place it in between the dies in the same spot every time. So now there are a lot of opportunities for automation. Robots are great. Robots work in a lot of different applications. Every single process step here is probably not applicable for a robot, but this one definitely is, just because of the environment in which the human being or the robot has to operate.
Yeah, I think we have one operation out there that is completely manual that no one was able to figure out how to automate. And then we have some operations out there that are still maybe manual overseas, where we're out producing 50 to 1 pieces per hour. I'm thinking about the fork tiner being one of those.
Sure.
So we're wrapping up our segment here, and we didn't have a chance to get on to the tooling topic. So we'll have to save that for another day. But thanks, Matt, for joining me today. And I guess we got to let you get back out there and make some spoons.
Yeah, and definitely tune in for the tooling side of the business, because we make tools unlike any other flatware manufacturer in the world, and we feel that we are by far the best at it.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Matt, and I hope you stick around. We're going to go off and pay a couple bills now. We're going to have Jim Stuber on next, the author of What If Things Were Made in America Again, to talk to us about a couple really interesting topics. So stick around.
Don't have the time or expertise to market your small business? Constant Contact's powerful digital marketing platform helps you grow your audience, engage your customers, and sell more to boost your business. Now, with just a few clicks, you can launch a personalized marketing campaign that includes email, social, SMS, and more, tailored to your business and your goals. Save time and get real results with Constant Contact. Try it free today at ConstantContact.com.
Hello, and welcome back to Home Talk USA. I'm Greg Owens, aka Made in America Guy, and we're here for the Made in America Hour with Jim Stuber. We'll be talking to him during a couple segments of the program. about two completely different subjects, but all related to Made in USA. And the first one is, you see something that says Made in USA, but what does that really mean? In order to put that on your product, it is a real privilege. And I listened to Rita talking about inventors going out there and getting patents and making sure that they do it right. Jim is here to talk with us a little bit about what the requirements are in order to put Made in USA on your packaging and on your product. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be with you again.
So, Made in USA, what do you have to accomplish in order to have the privilege of putting that very important statement on in your product?
Well, I wish it were less complicated than it is, but let me just start by saying, if you're exporting it, it's a lot simpler to be made in USA, because all you have to show is that you made the last substantial transformation of that product into something else, no matter what its components are, as long as you change it into a new use and a new name. Then when you export it, you can put that Made in USA and send it to Canada or China, wherever you want. But if you're selling it in the United States, then you're subject to a different standard. And this is the Federal Trade Commission, who have the authority to regulate advertising and labeling, truth in advertising, if you will. And the FTC says that it has to be truthful, that is, not deceptive, not misleading, and substantiated. You have to have proof for any claim you make. So if you say this thing works in temperatures up to 350 degrees, well, then you have to be able to, it has to be truthful, and you have to be able to prove it. And so if you say Made in USA, then you have to meet the FTC standard. So what is that standard? To start with, it does indeed have to have been substantially just transformed in the United States. So the way the FTC words that in their current rule is they say all significant processing that goes into the product occurs in the US, and that means basically the manufacturing processing. So, okay. And then they're saying, and the final assembly has to have occurred here in the United States. So now you've got a Made in USA product, and you'd hope that you were at the finish line. But no, they have a third requirement, and that is that all or virtually all of the ingredients or the components of that product are made and sourced in the United States. And this, Greg, as you know, is what we refer to as the all or virtually all standard. So everything in there, except for anything that really doesn't matter, has to be sourced in the United States. So as you can see, it's a pretty tall order.
Right. That's a heavy bar to lift. Fortunately, in our industry, we start with American steel. So pretty much everything in a knife, fork, or spoon is going to be made in USA. But go back to my favorite example. Imagine somebody was trying to introduce a toaster that was made in the United States. If they couldn't find the heating element in the United States and they had to import that, could they put Made in USA on it even though everything else is made here?
Really a great example, because even if that heating element is only, say, 20% of the cost of that toaster, it's so important to the toaster because, after all, it's doing the toasting. Then no, you couldn't say that's Made in USA because that piece of it was just too important a part. The FTC gives another example of a Tiffany lamp, and let's say the base is imported, but the Tiffany part, the glass, all that beautiful colored glass was made in the USA, and they would say no to that as well. That base is just too important a part of it. So, sorry, Greg, but your toaster wouldn't pass the test.
And your big example, that light bulb. If it was a GE light bulb from China and you sold the lamp with the light bulb, you couldn't put that on there either, right? That's probably why they don't sell them with light bulbs in them. But so who is in charge of enforcing these rules? And are they really enforced? Is there anybody digging into this?
It's the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C. It's a federal agency. They enforce the Federal Trade Commission Act, and they have a small but potent little division. I'm not sure how many people they have there besides the person in charge, to tell you the truth. But if they get wind of something, you better watch out. I was just in preparing for the show looking for some recent examples, and one of them was just in January. Kubota North America make tractors and so on. And I'm assuming this is an Asian company that bought an American factory maker. They were making factories here and made in USA claims, but unfortunately, their replacement parts, which they also put made in USA claims on, weren't made in USA. They were actually totally imported. And also, just to add insult to injury, they moved some plants out of the United States and didn't bother to stop making made in USA claims for those products. So they got hit with a $2 million civil penalty by the Federal Trade Commission. Another one that may be closer to many of our listeners' hearts is Williams-Sonoma. They, as you know, make all these home goods, and they were making these made in USA claims, but it turned out that their mattresses and different things they were selling were actually imported. They weren't even partially made in the USA. And so they got hit with a $3.17 million fine. But some of them aren't these big companies. And one of them that wasn't too long ago is kind of more representative of the folks out there making made in USA claims. And this one was it's called Old Southern Brass. So this sounds very American. And they were making products right here for the American man or woman alike, and supposedly including some components made from used 50 caliber machine gun casings. And it was all a lie. None of it was made in the USA, and they weren't veteran owned. And so the FTC hit them with a $5 million fine, but they withheld most of it because these guys, I don't think, had a lot of money. They made them pay $150,000. But so if any of us run across something that really gets our anger up, we can contact the FTC, let them know about it, and there's a good chance they're going to look into it.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted you to have on and go over this topic is, hopefully we have a lot of listeners out there that are thinking about making something in the USA that may not be 100% familiar with these rules. So if you have a doubt, it would be good right at the beginning to check and make sure that you are compliant. And there's a next level to this, which I've heard it expressed in a couple different ways, but you see it more and more now that Made in America has really become a brand in and of itself. And that is assembled in the USA with globally sourced parts. There's a completely different standard for putting that alongside the American flag on your packaging. Is there a percentage that the FTC attaches to the qualified claim, or is it more loosey-goosey?
It's loosey-goosey. They thought about the percentage twice, back in 1999 and again in 2019. And they thought about maybe a 70% standard. Just for the sake of argument, that would not be an easy standard to apply. But I think that depending on the product, your bill of materials, how complicated it is, you might be able to do it. But so far, they've said no. We're not going to apply a percentage standard for this or that claim. We'll let you make a qualified claim as long as it's truthful. And back to your earlier point, Greg, the FTC does encourage people to contact them so that they can be confident that they're complying with these rules when they bring a product to market.
Okay. Well, this sort of segues into our next topic, which is going to be cool legislation down in Washington, and that's country of origin legislation, because there is an actual rule where everything that's in a package has to have country of origin on it. But that rule didn't quite make it to the internet. And it's sort of the Wild West when you order something on the web, either through Amazon or directly from a site. And we're going to come back with Jim here in a couple minutes and talk about that. Leading up to that, Jim, how important do you think that is to customers to be able to know where the country of origin is in a product that they're buying? It's important to you, but how many people would you say actually look at the box and look for that?
Well, I wish I could be more confident and optimistic about that, but right now it's pretty disappointing about how many people care to do that. But there are big reasons why they should.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break here, pay some bills, and we'll be right back with Jim Stuber to talk about the coolest subject of the day, country of origin labeling on the internet. Hope to see you soon. Bye. So welcome back to Home Talk USA. This is the Made in America segment. I'm here with Jim Stuber, and we're going to finish up the hour with a discussion of country of origin labeling online and the battle that has been raging down in Washington for years to get something that seems pretty straightforward, and everybody that thinks about it would probably support it, but it meets with a lot of resistance. And there's a little interesting backstory on this. Tina, Truth in Advertising, caught Amazon years ago and found a bunch of products that were falsely labeling themselves as made in USA and were not. And they sort of went after them, hoping to make them tighten up the restrictions on and make them responsible for having correct claims and getting rid of the false claims on the site. Well, what they soon realized, Amazon did, was that there was no rule that said that you had to put it on the web as there was on packaging. We might argue against that. So instead of cleaning up their act, they simply took off country of origin, which used to be on Amazon a required field, and they buried it on page 46 as an optional thing. And you can just imagine that if it doesn't say made in USA, it's probably not. So Jim, welcome back. Do you have anything to add to the Tina story?
Well, it's just so sad, but the path of least resistance, Amazon just said, "Oh, okay, fine, we won't do that anymore." So, if, as you said, Greg, earlier, stop and think about this. When you're in the store, you do have the opportunity to have a look. And even though it's supposed to be prominently displayed, sometimes we have to kind of look for it. But indeed, there is a requirement that the country of origin of an imported product has to be on that package. Now, if it's not imported, you don't have to. There's no requirement that you put a made in USA label on there or a qualified claim. But of course, you would, because you want to advertise that. But if this is an imported product, then the customs rules say it has to be on the package. Well, that's great, except that now, especially after COVID and people started buying so much more on the internet, we realized this stuff was showing up on our door and it was made in China, and we had no idea. Neither did the members of Congress. So they started being more receptive to the idea that maybe we should have put the same requirement on something when it's sold on the internet as if you were looking at it on a store shelf. So this is what you refer to as the country of origin labeling bill to require this on the internet. And actually, Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin did introduce that bill. And I believe in the current Congress, it even was reported from a Senate committee. But as you alluded to earlier, there is some opposition to this.
Well, and you have kind of a fun anecdotal story of Hide the Ball, which I think actually involved a basketball. Do you remember that one when you went to buy a basketball, I believe, and instead of having it on the outside of the packaging, it was on the actual basketball buried in the back where you couldn't see it. And, what a surprise when you buy a Wilson basketball or something you just assume is made here, and you open it up and it says made in China.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be on the package, which it wasn't. And the part of the ball that you could see through the package just said Wilson. So I had to wait till I opened that package to learn that I had mistakenly bought a ball that was made in China. So this is that's an example of someone's failure to comply with that particular rule. But to your earlier question, what's really disappointing to me is that people haven't really caught on to the idea that this is important. But back to the question at hand, yes, this should be done on the internet. We should be able to know where something it is made, but it has attracted opposition from all the importers and from all the online sellers who would just rather not have people thinking about this. But it's really caused a big problem. This has been one of the reasons for countless losses of jobs, destroyed families, destroyed communities as the factory closed and was moved to China or to Mexico, or just closed because they couldn't compete. As you know, I added up all that damage in my book, What If Things Were Made in America Again? And my final chapter to my listeners, I would say, said, look, we as consumers could do a lot about this if we would bother to stop and read the label. I was looking at some paintbrushes recently, and there were two displays, one made in China, one made in USA, same price, Greg. And as I was standing there, some guy came up, grabbed one of the made in China brushes, went away, never even bothered to stop and look at the one right next to it, made in USA. If he had been thinking about it, he could have done it. And we all have the power to bring those jobs back if we would just start doing this. But on the internet, it's tough, and we've got to get this bill passed.
Well, one of the things that we use in our marketing frequently is a thing called Google Trends, where you can go on the internet and look for keywords that are trending on the web. And if you go back to 2005, the term made in USA or made in America was very low. First, during the Great Recession, and then during COVID, made in USA has really trended up. So thankfully, people are looking for it. I consider made in USA to be almost a brand. And when you go on Amazon, just imagine if they had to flip that switch again, make it mandatory, and prominently display made in USA, made in China, made in Mexico on a product, and brought that to the consumer's attention. If it was right in their face, prominently displayed, that would really probably change a lot of people's decision-making process, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes, because it would just stop them in their tracks just for that moment to have them stop and think about that. And having thought about it, I think that most people say they would prefer the American-made product. They'd even pay somewhat more for it.
And the other side of the coin is that the people that are selling imported stuff on the internet know that exact same thing, and they agree with it. So they want to play hide the ball as much as possible.
Yeah, in fact, the majority of Amazon sellers now are Chinese. I mean, they're all just selling on Amazon direct from China.
Well, we'll be back with updates from time to time on progress on bipartisan legislation, because this is something that both sides of the aisle tend to agree on. And any progress that we make through CPA and other organizations to get a bill finally passed to make the rules on the internet the same as they are on packaging that you see in the store. So thank you, Jim, for being with us for this hour. I really appreciate it. We hope to have you back to talk about a bunch of other exciting topics involving Made in America soon. And you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Greg. It's always a pleasure. Take care.
Okay, well, that wraps up Home Talk USA Made in America segment. We'll be back next week with some more exciting guests and some more information on how you can make it in America.